I raised my daughter as a single father. On her wedding day, she didn't invite me. Even so, she called me. We already got married. Send the keys to the house in Miami and stop being so dramatic. I hung up. 3 days later, my gift made her husband faint. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I raised my daughter as a single father. On her wedding day, she didn't invite me. Even so, she called me. We're already married. Send the keys to the house in Miami and stop being dramatic. I hung up. 3 days later, my gift made her husband faint. The phone rang at 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I remember the exact time because I was staring at my watch, counting down the minutes until Hannah's wedding ceremony was supposed to begin. The ceremony I wasn't invited to. The ceremony I'd found out about through a Facebook post from her college friend. Dad? Her voice came through the speaker with that familiar tone, the one she'd used since she was 16 whenever she wanted something from me. My hands were shaking as I held the phone. 24 years of raising her alone, and this was how I found out my only child had gotten married. Through social media, like I was some distant acquaintance. Hannah. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could hear the tremor in it. How was the wedding? She laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, it was perfect. Marcus has such wonderful taste. The venue was incredible. This historic plantation house with Spanish moss everywhere. Very romantic. I closed my eyes, picturing it. I'd dreamed of walking her down the aisle since the day she was born. I'd imagined giving a father of the bride speech, dancing with her to butterfly kisses like we used to when she was little. That sounds lovely, I managed to say. Listen, Dad, I'm calling because Marcus and I need the Miami house keys. We're flying down there for our honeymoon tomorrow morning. Can you FedEx them today? We don't have time for delays. The Miami house. Our Miami house. The one I'd bought when Hannah was 12, thinking it would be our special place. The one where we'd spent every spring break and summer vacation, where I'd taught her to swim in the pool, where we'd watched sunsets from the deck, where she'd brought her high school boyfriends to impress them. Hannah, sweetheart, we should probably talk about this in person. Why don't you and Marcus come over for dinner this weekend? I'd love to meet him properly. Dad, stop being dramatic. We're married now. I'm an adult. Just send the keys and stop making everything so complicated. Stop being dramatic. The words hit me like a physical blow. Dramatic for wanting to meet my son-in-law. Dramatic for feeling hurt that my only child had excluded me from the most important day of her life. Hannah, I just want to understand what happened. We talked 3 months ago and you mentioned planning an engagement party. You never said you were getting married so soon, and you certainly never mentioned that I wouldn't be. God, Dad, you're exhausting. Look, Marcus doesn't really do the whole big family thing. His parents are dead, and he thought it would be weird to have this huge celebration with just your side. So we kept it small, intimate, just us and a few close friends. Just us and a few close friends. Not family. Not the man who'd sacrificed everything to raise her. I thought back to when Hannah was 5 and her mother walked out on us. Patricia had left a note on the kitchen counter. I can't do this anymore. I'm not cut out to be a mother. Take care of Hannah. Don't look for me. I'd found Hannah that morning sitting at the breakfast table in her Dora the Explorer pajamas, asking where Mommy was. I'd knelt down beside her chair and promised her that no matter what, I would always be there for her. Always. I kept that promise. I turned down job promotions that would have required travel. I sold my classic Mustang to pay for her dance lessons. I learned to braid hair and paint tiny fingernails. I sat through every school play, every soccer game, every piano recital, even when I was exhausted from working double shifts to afford her private school tuition. Hannah, I said quietly, you're my daughter, my only family. How could you think I wouldn't want to be there? Because you always make everything about you, Dad. Always. This was supposed to be my day, and you would have found some way to make it stressful. Marcus could see that. He was protecting me from your intensity. My intensity. Is that what she called 24 years of unconditional love? Intensity? I don't understand where this is coming from. I thought we had a good relationship. We do, Dad. But I'm starting my own family now. Marcus and I need space to figure things out without you hovering all the time. Speaking of which, we really do need those keys. Marcus has meetings in Miami next week and we want to extend the honeymoon. Marcus has meetings. In my house. The house I'd worked 16-hour days to afford, thinking it would be Hannah's inheritance someday. the house where I'd planned to retire and maybe finally have those grandchildren visit for Christmas morning. Hannah, the house isn't just a vacation rental. It's our family home. It has sentimental value. Dad, seriously, stop being so possessive. It's just a house. And technically, I'm your heir anyway, so it'll be mine eventually. Why can't I use it now when I actually need it? Just a house. Eventually mine anyway. The casual entitlement in her voice was like listening to a stranger. When had my sweet little girl become this cold, calculating person? I remembered the day I'd carried her on my shoulders through the Miami house when we first bought it. She was 12, and she'd squealed with delight at the pool, begging me to let her skip school the next day so we could swim. I'd said yes, and we'd spent hours in the water, playing Marco Polo and racing from one end to the other. Hannah, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Do you love this man? Of course I love him, Dad. Why would you even ask that? Because 3 months ago you were dating someone named Brad, a law student, I think, and now you're married to someone I've never even heard of. There was a pause, a long one. People change their minds, Dad. Relationships evolve. Marcus swept me off my feet. He's sophisticated, successful, mature. He knows what he wants. And what does he want? A wife who's independent, who doesn't need her daddy holding her hand through every decision. The words stung because they weren't true. I hadn't held her hand through decisions. I'd simply been available when she needed me. There's a difference. Hannah, I'm your father. I love you. I just want to make sure you're happy and safe. I am happy. Happier than I've ever been. And I'd be even happier if you could just send those keys without making it into this big emotional thing. I walked to the window and looked out at my garden. Hannah had helped me plant those roses when she was 14, complaining the whole time that it was boring. But later, she'd brought friends over just to show off the flowers, proudly telling them she'd helped choose the colors. Where was that girl now? The one who used to curl up next to me on the couch to watch old movies. The one who called me her best friend when she was in high school. Dad, are you still there? I'm here. So you'll send the keys? I took a deep breath. Something in my gut was telling me this was wrong. All of it. The rushed marriage, the husband I'd never met, the sudden demand for access to valuable property. But I also knew that if I said no, Hannah would probably cut me out of her life entirely. I'll think about it. There's nothing to think about, Dad. Just send the keys. Hannah, I said I'll think about it. The line went quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed, colder, more deliberate. Fine, but don't take too long. Marcus isn't a patient man. The call ended, leaving me standing there with the phone in my hand, staring at my reflection in the dark window. For the first time in 24 years, I didn't recognize the man looking back at me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation, trying to understand how my relationship with my daughter had deteriorated so completely without my noticing. Or maybe I had noticed but hadn't wanted to see it. I got up and walked to Hannah's old room, which I'd kept exactly as she'd left it when she moved out for college. Her high school awards were still on the wall. Her stuffed animals were arranged on the bed. Photos of us together covered her dresser. Camping trips, birthday parties, graduation day. In every single photo, I was smiling, proud, happy to be her father. In most of them, Hannah was smiling too. But looking at them now, I wondered if I'd been seeing what I wanted to see rather than what was actually there. My phone buzzed with a text message. Dad, Marcus says if you don't send the keys by tomorrow, we'll just find another place for the honeymoon. Your choice. I stared at the message until the screen went dark, and I realized something that chilled me to the bone. I didn't know my daughter at all, and I was starting to suspect she didn't love me the way I'd always believed she did. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I couldn't stop thinking about Hannah's words. Marcus isn't a patient man. What kind of threat was that supposed to be? And why was my daughter delivering it? I spent the morning walking through the house, looking at everything with new eyes. The piano in the living room. I'd bought it when Hannah was 7 because she'd mentioned wanting to learn. I'd worked overtime for 6 months to afford those lessons. The built-in bookshelves were filled with every book she'd ever loved, from Goodnight Moon to her college literature textbooks that I'd helped her buy. Every corner of this house told the story of my devotion to my daughter. But apparently that devotion had become intensity and hovering. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Dr. Martinez's number. Elena had been Hannah's pediatrician when she was young, and over the years, she'd become something of a friend. She'd seen me through every milestone, every crisis, every moment of single-parent panic. "Raymond?" Elena answered on the second ring. "What a nice surprise. How's Hannah doing?" "She got married yesterday." There was a pause. "Congratulations. That's wonderful news. You must be so proud. How was the wedding?" "I wasn't invited." Another pause, longer this time. "I'm sorry, what?" I told her everything. The phone call, the demand for the Miami house keys, the casual cruelty of being excluded from my own daughter's wedding. Elena listened without interrupting, making those small, sympathetic sounds that doctors learn to make when someone is in pain. "Raymond," she said finally, "I have to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer. Looking back over the past few years, have there been other signs that Hannah was pulling away?" I wanted to say no immediately, but as I thought about it, images started flooding back. Hannah at 21, asking for money to study abroad in Italy, then barely calling while she was there. When she did call, she was always rushing to get off the phone, always had somewhere else to be. Hannah at 23, graduating from college and moving to New York without discussing it with me first. "I need to be independent, Dad." You understand, right? Hannah at 25, dating that investment banker who never wanted to visit Florida. "He's just not a beach person, Dad. Maybe you could come up here instead." But whenever I suggested visiting, she was always busy with work events or friends' parties. "Maybe," I admitted to Elena. But I thought she was just growing up, becoming her own person. That's normal. But completely excluding you from her wedding? That's not normal, Raymond. That's concerning. I walked into Hannah's old room and sat on her bed, surrounded by all those photos and memories. "Elena, I keep wondering if I spoiled her, if I gave her too much. Tell me what you mean." So I told her about selling my business when Hannah was 16 because she'd gotten into an expensive private boarding school and claimed it was her dream school. About the credit cards I'd given her in college with no spending limits because I wanted her to focus on her studies, not worry about money. About the BMW I'd bought her for her 21st birthday because she'd mentioned how embarrassed she was to drive her old Honda. "Raymond," Elena said gently, "you gave her everything she wanted." "I gave her everything I never had," I corrected. "My parents were distant, cold. I swore I'd never make my child feel unloved or unsupported. But there's a difference between being supportive and being an enabler." The word hit me like a slap. Enabler. I thought about the time Hannah was 19 and called me crying because she'd failed a midterm. Instead of encouraging her to talk to her professor or study harder, I'd called the school and donated money for a new computer lab. Suddenly, Hannah's grade had been reviewed and raised to a passing score. I thought about when she was 22 and got fired from her first internship for showing up late repeatedly. Instead of letting her face the consequences, I'd called in a favor with a business contact and gotten her a better position at a different company. I thought about last year when she'd called panicking about credit card debt. She'd run up nearly $30,000 in charges on vacation trips and shopping sprees. Instead of making her figure out a payment plan or get a second job, I'd simply paid it off. "Oh God," I whispered into the phone. "I created this, didn't I?" "You created a young woman who's never had to face real consequences for her actions," Elena said carefully. "And now she's married to a man you've never met, demanding access to valuable property and treating you like an inconvenience. What do I do? First, you don't send those keys. Not until you meet this Marcus and get a sense of who he is. Second, you might want to do some research on him." "Research?" "Raymond, Hannah went from dating a law student 3 months ago to marrying a complete stranger. That's not normal behavior. And if this Marcus is as sophisticated and successful as she claims, why does he need to use your Miami house for business meetings?" After we hung up, I sat in Hannah's room for a long time, looking at all those photos differently. In the recent ones, the ones from her college years and after, I noticed something I'd missed before. Hannah's smiles looked forced, practiced, like she was performing for the camera rather than genuinely happy. And in every photo where she was receiving a gift or celebrating an achievement I'd made possible, there was something else in her eyes. Not gratitude, expectation, as if she'd come to view my sacrifices as her due. I walked downstairs to my home office and opened my laptop. If Elena was right, if something was wrong with this sudden marriage, then I needed to know what I was dealing with. I started with social media. Hannah's Facebook page showed photos from what was apparently a small ceremony at some upscale venue. She looked beautiful in a simple white dress, standing next to a man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive suit. Marcus, I assumed. He was older than I'd expected, much older. Hannah was 28. This man looked like he was pushing 60. Not that age gaps were automatically problematic, but combined with everything else, it raised more questions. I studied his face, trying to get a read on him. He had the kind of polished appearance that came with money. Perfect teeth, professional haircut, designer clothes. But something about his smile bothered me. It didn't reach his eyes. I clicked on his profile. Marcus Rothwell. Listed as entrepreneur and investor. No specific companies mentioned. No work history, no family photos. Just pictures of expensive cars, luxury vacation destinations, and high-end restaurants. The kind of social media presence designed to impress rather than inform. I tried searching for him on Google. A few business articles mentioned his name in passing, but nothing substantial. No detailed biography, no company website, no professional achievements worth documenting. For someone Hannah described as sophisticated and successful, he had surprisingly little digital footprint. That bothered me. I called my attorney, James Whitman. James had handled my business sale and various legal matters over the years. He was also a father of daughters and would understand my concerns. James, I need you to run a background check on someone. Sure, Raymond. What's going on? I explained the situation. The sudden marriage, the demand for property access, my growing unease about this Marcus character. You're right to be cautious, James said. I've seen this before. Older men who prey on young women from wealthy families. They move fast to avoid scrutiny and immediately start pushing for access to assets. You think that's what this is? I think you should find out before you hand over keys to a multi-million-dollar property. James promised to have information within 48 hours. In the meantime, he advised me not to give Hannah or Marcus access to anything until we knew more. That afternoon, Hannah called again. Dad, where are the keys? I told you we needed them today. Hannah, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. I'd really like to meet Marcus before. Oh my God, Dad, what is wrong with you? We're married. You don't get to interview my husband like I'm still 16. I'm not trying to interview anyone. I just think it's normal for families to meet each other, especially before sharing property. Families meet each other before the wedding, Dad. But you made it very clear over the years that you weren't interested in being part of my adult life. I made it clear. Hannah, how did I make that clear? By being so controlling. By questioning every decision I made. By making my boyfriends feel uncomfortable with your constant hovering. I tried to remember making any boyfriend uncomfortable. The law student she'd mentioned, Brad, I'd met him exactly once, at a graduation dinner. I'd asked him about his career plans and wished him luck on his bar exam. That was controlling. Hannah, I don't remember being controlling. I remember being interested in your life. Same thing, Dad. Look, Marcus says this is exactly the kind of behavior he was trying to protect me from. He says some fathers can't let go of their daughters and it becomes unhealthy. Marcus says, how convenient that this man I'd never met was already an expert on my relationship with my daughter. What else does Marcus say about me? He says you probably mean well, but that I need to set boundaries if I want to have a healthy marriage. Set boundaries. With the man who'd raised her alone for 24 years. Hannah, I want you to be happy. If setting boundaries is what you need, we can discuss that. But completely cutting me out of major life events isn't setting boundaries, it's cutting ties. Nobody cut you out, Dad. We just didn't want the stress of a big wedding. Marcus has been married before, and he said they're usually more trouble than they're worth. Marcus had been married before, another piece of information Hannah had failed to mention. How many times has he been married? I don't know, Dad. A couple times. Who cares? His previous marriages didn't work out, but ours will be different. What happened to his previous wives? God, Dad, you're being creepy now. They got divorced, like half of all married couples. It's not some big conspiracy, but something in her voice suggested she didn't know the details either, and that worried me more than anything else. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone. My daughter had married a man she barely knew, and now she was parroting his opinions about me and our relationship. She was demanding access to valuable property for a honeymoon that was apparently doubling as business meetings. Elena was right. None of this was normal. I just had to hope James would find something that would help me understand what I was really dealing with, because my gut was telling me that Hannah wasn't just pulling away from me. She was in danger, and she was too blind to see it. James called me at 6:30 a.m. 2 days earlier than promised. I could hear the tension in his voice before he even said hello. "Raymond, we need to talk. In person. Can you come to my office this morning? You found something." I found a lot of things, none of them good. I was dressed and in my car within 20 minutes. James's office was downtown, in one of those glass towers that made you feel small just walking into the lobby. I'd been there many times over the years for business matters, but I'd never felt this sick to my stomach walking through those polished doors. James was waiting for me with a thick manila folder and a pot of coffee that looked like it had been brewing all night. His usually impeccable suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened. This was not the composed attorney I knew. "Sit down, Raymond," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "What I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear." He opened the folder and spread several documents across his desk. Police reports, newspaper clippings, court filings, death certificates. My blood ran cold, just looking at them. "Marcus Rothwell has been married 4 times in the past 15 years, James began. "Not twice like Hannah thinks. 4 times. "Divorced 4 times? James's expression darkened. 3 divorces. 1 death. The room seemed to tilt around me. Death. His second wife, Catherine Rothwell, died in a car accident 6 months after their wedding. Single-car crash on a mountain road in Colorado. Very convenient timing, considering she'd just inherited a substantial sum from her grandmother. I stared at the death certificate, the official language making something horrific sound routine. I think Marcus Rothwell has a pattern," James interrupted, "and your daughter fits it perfectly." He laid out 3 more files. Wife number 1, Jennifer Walsh, married in 2009, divorced in 2010 after she discovered he'd taken out credit cards in her name and maxed them out. She was left with $80,000 in debt and a ruined credit score. Wife number 3, Sandra Chen, married in 2015, divorced in 2017, but not before Marcus convinced her to sell her late father's restaurant and invest the proceeds in one of his business ventures. The money disappeared. Sandra lost everything and had to move back in with her elderly mother. And wife number 4, Rebecca Santos, married in 2019. She owned a successful boutique hotel in Key West. During their 18-month marriage, Marcus gradually took over the business operations. When Rebecca filed for divorce, she discovered he'd been embezzling from the hotel accounts and had mortgaged the property without her knowledge. She lost the hotel and is currently working as a hotel manager for someone else. I felt sick. All of them had money. All of them had assets Marcus could access, James confirmed, and all of them were isolated from their families during the marriage. He's very good at convincing women that their relatives are toxic, controlling, jealous of their happiness. The words hit me like physical blows. Hannah's sudden coldness, her accusations that I was controlling and hovering, her adoption of Marcus's opinions about me and our relationship. It was all part of a script he'd used before. "There's more," James continued grimly. "I had my investigator dig deeper into Catherine's accident." He pulled out another report, this one marked Private Investigation, Confidential. Catherine had called her sister 3 days before she died. She was scared. She said Marcus had been pressuring her to change her will to make him the sole beneficiary. She was planning to leave him, but she was afraid of what he might do. And then she died in a convenient accident. The police investigated, but they couldn't prove anything. Marcus had an alibi. He was supposedly in Denver on business. But my investigator found something interesting. The GPS in Catherine's car showed she'd been to Denver that day too. She was following him, trying to catch him in a lie about where he was. She was driving back alone, on a road she'd never traveled before, in a car that Marcus had recently had serviced. The brake lines weren't cut, that would be too obvious, but the brake fluid was old, the lines were corroded in exactly the right places, an accident waiting to happen. I stared at the photographs of twisted metal and broken glass, trying not to imagine Hannah in a similar situation. "James, what do I do? If I show Hannah this information, she'll just think I'm trying to sabotage her marriage. She's already convinced I'm jealous and controlling." "That's exactly what he wants her to think," James said. "This isolation technique is textbook predatory behavior. He's already rewritten the history of your relationship in her mind, made her believe you're the problem." I thought about Hannah's phone calls, how she'd started parroting Marcus's opinions about me, how she'd suddenly remembered our relationship as suffocating and unhealthy when just 6 months ago she'd called me on Father's Day to tell me I was the best dad ever. What about the Miami house? Should I give them the keys? James's expression turned deadly serious. Raymond, under no circumstances should you give this man access to that property. Based on his pattern, I believe he married Hannah specifically because he knew about her inheritance potential. The Miami house is worth what, $3 million? 3.8, according to the last appraisal. He's going to try to get Hannah to sign papers giving him access to your assets, maybe a power of attorney, maybe something that makes him a beneficiary if anything happens to you, and once he has legal access. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I walked to James's window and looked down at the city below. Somewhere out there, my daughter was on her honeymoon with a man who might have killed his previous wife. She thought she was living in a fairy tale, but she was actually trapped in a horror story. There's something else, James said quietly. I had my investigator look into how Marcus met Hannah. It wasn't a coincidence. He showed me another document, credit card records, and social media data. Marcus has been following Hannah's social media for over a year. He knew where she worked, where she went to happy hour with friends, which gym she used. 3 months ago, he engineered a chance meeting at that new wine bar she posted about constantly. He stalked her. He researched her. Like a predator selecting prey, Hannah posts about her lifestyle, her family, her inheritance expectations. She might as well have worn a sign saying wealthy daddy will inherit millions. The full scope of the manipulation hit me like a freight train. This wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was a calculated attack on my daughter and my family's assets, and Hannah was so completely under his influence that she couldn't see it. I sat back down, my legs suddenly unsteady. James, what happens if I refuse to give him the keys and Hannah chooses him over me? Then you document everything. You make sure your will is ironclad, with provisions that protect your assets from any current or future spouses Hannah might have, and you hope that eventually she sees through him before it's too late. And if she doesn't, James's expression was grim, then you hope she's luckier than Catherine Rothwell. I spent the rest of the morning in James's office, going through every document, memorizing every detail of Marcus's history. By the time I left, I had copies of everything: police reports, financial records, witness statements from his previous wives. The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus Rothwell was a professional predator who targeted women with money, isolated them from their families, gained access to their assets, and then discarded them. In Catherine's case, he might have done much worse than discard her. But proving it to Hannah would be nearly impossible. She was so completely convinced that I was the problem in our relationship that she'd probably see my evidence as fabricated jealousy. I drove home slowly, trying to figure out my next move. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone rang. Hannah. Dad, I'm getting really tired of this game. Marcus is furious that you're making us wait for the keys. He says it's disrespectful to our marriage. Hannah, there's something I need to tell you about Marcus. Oh God, here we go. Dad, whatever gossip you've dug up, I don't want to hear it. This isn't gossip. It's documented facts about his previous marriages. I know about his previous marriages. He was honest with me about his past relationships. Did he tell you that one of his wives died under suspicious circumstances? There was silence on the line. Hannah, Dad, you're scaring me. Not because of what you're saying about Marcus, but because of how obsessed you've become. This isn't healthy. Hannah, please, just listen to me for 5 minutes. No, I'm done listening to you tear down my husband. Marcus was right about you. He said you'd try to sabotage our marriage because you can't stand that I don't need you anymore. Marcus was right about me. Again. How perfectly he'd predicted my response, prepared her for my concerns, made sure she'd dismiss anything I said as pathological jealousy. Hannah, I love you. I just want you to be safe. I am safe. I'm safer and happier than I've ever been. And I'd be even safer if you'd stop harassing us with these paranoid conspiracy theories. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my car in my own driveway holding my phone, feeling more helpless than I'd ever felt in my life. My daughter was married to a man who had possibly killed his previous wife, and she was so thoroughly manipulated that she saw my attempts to protect her as attacks on her happiness. For 24 years, I'd protected Hannah from everything: poverty, abandonment, disappointment, consequence. I'd created a perfect bubble around her, where she never had to face any real danger or hardship. But I couldn't protect her from this. The very sheltering that I'd thought was love had made her vulnerable to exactly this kind of predator. She had no experience recognizing danger because I'd never let her face any. And now, the biggest threat she'd ever encountered had convinced her that I was the real enemy. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Dad, Marcus and I have decided to book a different place for our honeymoon since you're being so difficult about the house. But this isn't over. We'll be back from our trip in 2 weeks, and we're going to have a serious conversation about boundaries." I stared at the message, and something cold settled in my chest. Marcus hadn't given up on the Miami house. He was just regrouping, planning a different approach. In 2 weeks, they'd be back. And I had to be ready for whatever came next. Because looking at all of James's evidence, one thing was absolutely clear. Marcus Rothwell didn't take no for an answer, and people who got in his way had a tendency to disappear. 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks to figure out how to save my daughter from a man who had possibly murdered his previous wife. I spent those 14 days learning everything I could about Marcus Rothwell. I hired a second private investigator to verify James's findings and dig deeper. I contacted the sister of Catherine Rothwell, the wife who'd died in that convenient car accident. I even reached out to Jennifer, Sandra, and Rebecca, the 3 ex-wives who'd survived their marriages to Marcus. What I learned made me sick to my stomach. Jennifer Walsh agreed to meet me at a coffee shop in Atlanta, where she now worked as a kindergarten teacher. She was a small woman in her 40s with nervous hands and the kind of jumpiness that comes from lasting trauma. "He was so charming at first," she told me, stirring her coffee with shaking fingers. "Attentive, romantic, everything I thought I wanted in a husband. But the moment we got back from our honeymoon, everything changed." "How?" "He started isolating me from my family. My parents were negative influences. My sister was jealous of our happiness. My friends were trying to sabotage our marriage. Within 6 months, I was completely cut off from everyone who cared about me." "And then he started stealing from you." Jennifer nodded. "Credit cards in my name, loans against my car, even forging my signature on checks. When I confronted him, he convinced me it was my fault for not trusting him. He was so good at making me doubt my own reality." "How did you get out?" "My sister showed up at my door one day when Marcus was at work. She literally dragged me to a lawyer and helped me file for divorce. Even then, Marcus tried to make me believe I was making a mistake, that I'd never find anyone who loved me the way he did." Jennifer looked at me with haunted eyes. The scariest part wasn't the money he stole, it was how completely he controlled my thoughts. By the end, I couldn't make a decision without his approval. I didn't know who I was anymore. I left that meeting feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Everything Jennifer described sounded exactly like what was happening to Hannah. The isolation, the rewriting of family relationships, the total psychological control. Sandra Chen was harder to track down, but I finally reached her by phone. Her story was even worse. "Marcus convinced me to sell my father's restaurant," she told me, her voice still bitter years later. "It had been in our family for 30 years. My father built it from nothing, and it was his dream to pass it down to me. Why did you sell it?" "Because Marcus made me believe it was holding me back. He said I'd never be truly successful as long as I was tied to my family's old-fashioned expectations. He had this business plan, this amazing investment opportunity that would make us millionaires." "What happened to the money?" Sandra's laugh was hollow. "Gone, all of it." "The business never existed. Marcus had created fake documents, fake partners, fake everything. By the time I realized what had happened, he'd disappeared with every penny, and your family. My father died a year later. The restaurant was his whole life, and losing it broke his heart. He never forgave me for selling it to a con man. My mother barely speaks to me now." The conversation with Rebecca Santos was the most chilling of all. She'd owned a boutique hotel in Key West, a successful business she'd built over 15 years. Marcus had systematically destroyed it. "He was so supportive at first," Rebecca explained during our video call. "He said he wanted to help me expand, take the business to the next level. I was touched that someone believed in my dreams." "When did things change?" "Gradually. He started questioning my business decisions, suggesting I wasn't qualified to handle certain aspects of hotel management. He volunteered to take over the financial side while I focused on guest services." "And you agreed?" "I trusted him. He was my husband, and he made it sound so logical. Why stress myself with bookkeeping when he had business experience?" "How long before you realized what was happening?" Rebecca's voice turned cold. 18 months. I started getting calls from suppliers about unpaid bills. When I asked Marcus about it, he said there were temporary cash flow issues, that he was handling it, but the calls kept coming. So you investigated. I hired a forensic accountant. Marcus had been embezzling from the hotel accounts for over a year. He'd also mortgaged the property without my knowledge, using forged signatures. I lost everything. The hotel, my savings, my credit. I'm 45 years old and living in a one-bedroom apartment, working for someone else. Did you press charges? I tried. But Marcus was smart. He'd created a paper trail that made it look like I'd authorized everything. His lawyer argued that it was a marital dispute, not criminal fraud. The DA didn't pursue it. After talking to all three women, the pattern was crystal clear. Marcus was a sophisticated predator who specialized in psychological manipulation and financial fraud. He targeted successful women with assets, isolated them from their support systems, gained control of their finances, and then systematically destroyed their lives. And now he had his sights set on Hannah and our family's wealth. The question was, how could I expose him without driving Hannah further into his arms? I spent hours discussing strategy with James. Direct confrontation wouldn't work. Hannah was too thoroughly manipulated to believe anything negative about Marcus. Legal action was premature. Marcus hadn't actually committed any crimes against our family yet. Going to the police would be pointless. They couldn't arrest someone for having a suspicious past. But then I had an idea. What if I don't try to convince Hannah at all? I asked James during one of our strategy sessions. What do you mean? What if I target Marcus directly, force him to reveal his true nature? James raised an eyebrow. That sounds dangerous, Raymond. Maybe, but think about it. Marcus's whole strategy depends on control. He controls the narrative, controls Hannah's perceptions, controls the flow of information. What if I disrupted that control? How? I smiled, and I could see James getting nervous at my expression. I'm going to give them a wedding present. The idea came to me while I was looking through all the evidence James had compiled. Police reports, financial records, witness statements, court filings, a complete documentation of Marcus's criminal history. Instead of trying to convince Hannah, what if I put this information directly in Marcus's hands? I spent 3 days preparing the perfect package. I had a professional document service create a bound presentation with Marcus Rothwell's photograph on the cover and the title, A Complete History. Inside were copies of every piece of evidence James had gathered, organized chronologically and cross-referenced. Police reports from Catherine's suspicious death, financial records showing his theft from Jennifer, Sandra, and Rebecca, court documents from their divorce proceedings, statements from witnesses who could testify to his pattern of abuse and manipulation. But the centerpiece was something I'd obtained through my second private investigator, surveillance photographs of Marcus with other women during his marriage to Rebecca. Not just one affair, but multiple relationships he'd maintained simultaneously. The photos were recent enough to overlap with his courtship of Hannah. I also included a detailed timeline showing how Marcus had stalked Hannah on social media before orchestrating their chance meeting. Screenshots of his searches, records of his visits to locations she'd posted about, evidence that their entire relationship had been premeditated. The final section was the most damning, a psychological profile prepared by Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a forensic psychologist who specialized in predatory behavior. Based on Marcus's history, she'd identified him as a classic psychopathic manipulator with narcissistic and antisocial tendencies. Mr. Rothwell exhibits a clear pattern of targeting vulnerable women for financial exploitation, Dr. Mitchell had written. His methods include isolation from family support systems, gradual assumption of financial control, and systematic psychological abuse designed to create dependency. Given his history, any current or future romantic partners should be considered at risk for emotional, financial, and potentially physical harm. I had the entire package professionally bound in elegant leather with gold lettering. It looked like a wedding album or anniversary gift, something expensive and meaningful. On the morning Hannah and Marcus were scheduled to return from their honeymoon, I had the package delivered to their hotel room with a card that read, "For Marcus, welcome to the family. I thought you should know that I know exactly who you are. Raymond." Then I waited. The call came 6 hours later, not from Hannah, but from Marcus himself. "Raymond." His voice was calm, controlled, but I could hear the underlying tension. "I received your gift. Did you enjoy it? It's very thorough. You've obviously invested considerable time and money in this research. I wanted to be accurate. There was a pause. What exactly do you want? I want you to leave my daughter alone. Marcus chuckled, and the sound made my skin crawl. I'm afraid that's not possible. Hannah and I are married. We're in love. We're building a life together. No, Marcus. You're executing a plan to steal her inheritance and destroy her life, just like you did to Catherine, Jennifer, Sandra, and Rebecca. Another pause, longer this time. You know, Marcus said finally, Hannah warned me that you were obsessive, but I didn't realize you were actually delusional. I'm not delusional. I'm informed. These are old stories, Raymond. Ancient history. People make mistakes. Relationships end. Accidents happen. None of it has anything to do with my marriage to Hannah. Catherine's death wasn't an accident. Catherine died in a car crash. The police investigated thoroughly and found no evidence of foul play. Because you're smart, you know how to make murder look like an accident. Marcus's voice turned ice cold. Be very careful about what you accuse me of, Raymond. Slander is a serious crime. So is fraud and theft and murder. I think this conversation is over. No, Marcus, this conversation is just beginning, because here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell Hannah the truth about who you are, and you're going to leave our family alone. Or I'm going to make sure that every detail of your criminal history becomes public knowledge. Marcus laughed, genuinely amused. You think you can threaten me? Raymond, you have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A coward who preys on women and runs when he gets caught. I don't run from anything, and I certainly don't run from pathetic old men who can't accept that their daughters have grown up. We'll see about that. I hung up before he could respond. 3 hours later, Hannah called. She was crying. Dad, what did you do? I sent Marcus some information I thought he should see. He's furious. I've never seen him like this. He's talking about filing a restraining order against you. Hannah, where are you right now? We're at the hotel. Marcus went for a walk to cool down. Dad, what was in that package? For a moment, I thought she might actually be ready to hear the truth. But then I heard footsteps in the background, and her voice changed. Never mind. I don't want to know. Marcus is back. Dad, you need to stop this. Whatever game you're playing, it needs to end now. Hannah, I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protection. I need you to respect my marriage and stop trying to sabotage my happiness. The line went dead. I sat in my kitchen, staring at my phone, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. Had I just pushed Hannah further into Marcus's control? Had I given him ammunition to use against me? But then I thought about Catherine Rothwell, dead at 29 in a convenient car accident. I thought about Jennifer, Sandra, and Rebecca, their lives destroyed by a man who specialized in psychological manipulation and financial theft. I couldn't let that happen to Hannah, no matter what it cost me. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Game on, old man. Let's see how this plays out. I smiled grimly and typed back. I'm ready when you are. But even as I sent the message, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just declared war on a man who had nothing to lose and everything to gain. And somewhere in that hotel room, my daughter was trapped in the middle of a battle she didn't even know was being fought. The next 72 hours were the longest of my life. Marcus had gone silent after our confrontation, which worried me more than his threats had. In my experience, dangerous people are most lethal when they're quiet, planning their next move. Hannah called once, her voice strained and distant. Dad, Marcus and I are extending our honeymoon. We need some time to process everything that's happened. Hannah, where are you staying? I can't tell you that. Marcus says you might try to find us, and we need space right now. The fear in her voice broke my heart. My daughter was afraid of me, the man who'd spent 24 years protecting her from every possible harm. Sweetheart, I would never hurt you. You know that, right? I don't know what I know anymore, Dad. Marcus showed me some of the things you wrote about him, the accusations you made. It's scary how obsessed you've become. I could hear Marcus coaching her in the background, his voice too low to make out words but clear enough to recognize the manipulative tone. Hannah, please, just listen to me for 1 minute. That man is dangerous. I have proof. Stop. Her voice cracked with emotion. I can't do this anymore. Marcus was right. You're trying to destroy my marriage because you can't stand that I chose someone over you. That's not true, isn't it? You've spent my whole life making sure I depended on you for everything. And now that I've found someone who actually loves me for who I am, not what I can give them, you can't handle it." The irony was devastating. Marcus had convinced her that I was the manipulative one, that I was the one who'd spent years controlling her. He'd taken every sacrifice I'd made out of love and reframed it as selfish control. "Hannah, I love you. Everything I've done has been because I love you." "Then let me go, Dad. Let me be happy." The line went dead, and I knew I might never hear from my daughter again. But on the third day, everything changed. I was in my home office, staring at my computer screen and trying to figure out my next move, when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Is this Raymond Patterson?" "Yes. My name is Detective Lisa Morrison with the Key West Police Department. I'm calling about Marcus Rothwell." My blood turned to ice. "What about him?" "Sir, are you familiar with Mr. Rothwell's history?" "Very familiar. Why?" "We've just arrested him on charges of fraud, theft, and identity theft. Your daughter Hannah was with him at the time of arrest." I felt the room spinning around me. "Is Hannah okay?" "Physically, she's fine. Emotionally, she's pretty shaken up. She's asking for you." I was in my car within minutes, driving toward Key West faster than I'd ever driven in my life. Detective Morrison had explained the basics. Marcus had been running a real estate scam, selling properties he didn't own to wealthy tourists. The FBI had been tracking him for months, and my package of evidence had provided the final pieces they needed to make the arrest. But more importantly, during their extended honeymoon, Hannah had started to see cracks in Marcus's perfect facade. "She called us this morning," Detective Morrison had explained, "said she'd found some disturbing things in her husband's laptop and wanted to report suspicious activity." I found Hannah at the police station, sitting in a witness room with red-rimmed eyes and the shell-shocked expression of someone whose entire world had just collapsed. When she saw me, she broke down completely. "Daddy, I'm so sorry," she sobbed, using the name she hadn't called me in years. "You were right about everything." I held her while she cried, feeling every tear as if it were my own. For the first time in months, my daughter was really present. Not the manipulated puppet Marcus had been controlling, but the real Hannah I'd raised and loved. "Tell me what happened," I said gently. Hannah wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. "Yesterday morning, Marcus got a phone call. He thought I was in the shower, but I could hear him talking to someone about closing the deal and getting access to the old man's accounts." The old man, me. I started paying attention to his conversations after that, and then I found his laptop open while he was on the beach. "Dad, he had files on me, on you, on our family's financial information, photos of our house, property records, even articles about your business success. What else? Pictures of other women, lots of them, and not just recent photos. These went back months, some from before we even met. He was seeing other people the entire time we were dating. I wasn't surprised, but I let her continue. But the worst part was a folder labeled Hannah Project. It had a timeline of our relationship, notes about my personality, strategies for isolating me from you. Dad, our entire romance was planned. Every spontaneous date, every coincidental meeting, he'd written it all down like a business plan. The Hannah Project, even the name made me sick. "There was something else," Hannah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "A document called Inheritance Timeline. It had information about your will, your properties, your investments. Things I'd never told him, things I didn't even know myself. How could he have gotten that information? I don't know. But Dad, there were notes about making sure I was properly positioned when you died. He was planning for your death. The implications hit me like a freight train. Marcus hadn't just been planning to steal from Hannah. He'd been planning to ensure I died sooner rather than later, positioning himself to inherit everything through my daughter. That's when I called the police," Hannah said. "I was scared, confused, but I knew I had to report what I'd found. And then they told me about the real estate fraud and the other charges and, oh God, Dad, what if you hadn't sent that package? What if I'd never found out?" I held her tighter, thinking about Catherine Rothwell and her convenient car accident. Detective Morrison joined us an hour later with an update that made my blood run cold. "We searched Mr. Rothwell's hotel room and found some interesting items," she said, including a vial of potassium chloride and several syringes. "What's potassium chloride?" Hannah asked. "It's a drug that can cause cardiac arrest," I said quietly, remembering my research into Catherine's death. "It's almost impossible to detect in an autopsy unless you're specifically looking for it." Hannah went pale. "You think he was going to?" "We think Mr. Rothwell was preparing for multiple contingencies," Detective Morrison said diplomatically. "The good news is that we stopped him before he could implement any of his plans." We spent the rest of the day giving statements to the police and FBI agents. The scope of Marcus's crimes was staggering. He'd been running similar scams in multiple states, targeting wealthy women and their families. The evidence I'd compiled had been crucial in establishing the pattern of behavior that prosecutors needed for a federal case. But the personal revelations were even more devastating than the criminal charges. "He never loved me at all, did he?" Hannah asked as we sat in my hotel room that evening. "No, sweetheart. I don't think he's capable of love. How did I not see it? How was I so blind?" I thought about my conversation with Dr. Martinez, about the difference between being supportive and being an enabler. "Hannah, I need to apologize to you. I think I made you vulnerable to someone like Marcus." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "I spent your whole life protecting you from consequences, fixing your problems, making sure you never had to face real hardship. I thought I was showing love, but I never taught you how to recognize danger or handle difficult situations on your own. Dad, you were a wonderful father. I was an overprotective father. There's a difference. I created a world where you never had to question anyone's motives or protect yourself from manipulation, because I was always there to handle everything." Hannah was quiet for a long time, processing what I'd said. "But you tried to warn me about Marcus. After it was almost too late. If I'd raised you differently, if I'd taught you to be more skeptical, more self-reliant, you might have seen through him before you married him. Or maybe he's just really good at what he does." That was true too. Marcus was a professional predator who'd perfected his techniques over years of practice. Even a more experienced woman might have fallen for his manipulation. "The important thing is that you're safe now," I said. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. Marcus was in jail, but the damage he'd done to Hannah's sense of reality, her ability to trust her own judgment, her relationship with me, all of that would take time to heal. That night, as Hannah slept in the hotel room's second bed, I got a call from James. "Raymond, there's something you need to know. Marcus made bail." I felt my heart stop. How is that possible? His lawyer argued that he wasn't a flight risk because of his marriage to Hannah. The judge set bail at $2 million, and someone paid it. Who? We don't know yet. But Raymond, if Marcus is out, you and Hannah could be in danger. He knows you're the reason he got arrested. I looked at Hannah, sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, and felt a familiar surge of protective rage. Marcus had destroyed her emotionally, financially manipulated her, and possibly planned to murder both of us. And now he was free to finish what he'd started. "James, I need you to arrange security for Hannah. And I want that Miami house watched 24 hours a day. What about you?" I walked to the hotel window and looked out at the dark parking lot, wondering if Marcus was already out there somewhere, planning his revenge. "I can take care of myself." But as I hung up the phone, I realized that this nightmare was far from over. Marcus Rothwell was free, furious, and desperate predators are the most dangerous kind. Hannah stirred in her sleep, murmuring something I couldn't make out. I moved closer to her bed, ready to wake her if she was having a nightmare. Instead, she was smiling slightly, and I heard her whisper, "Thank you, Daddy." And for the first time in months, my daughter felt safe enough to sleep peacefully. And I was going to make sure she stayed that way, no matter what it cost me. 3 months later, I was sitting in my garden when Hannah brought me the newspaper. "Dad, you need to see this." The headline made me smile. "Convicted fraudster Marcus Rothwell sentenced to 15 years in federal prison." The article detailed his conviction on multiple counts of fraud, theft, identity theft, and conspiracy. The prosecution had used my evidence package as the foundation of their case, and testimony from Jennifer, Sandra, Rebecca, and Catherine's sister had painted a devastating picture of his predatory behavior. But the most satisfying part was the final paragraph. Rothwell's assets, including several luxury vehicles and properties acquired through fraudulent means, will be liquidated to provide restitution to his victims. 15 years, Hannah said, sitting beside me on the garden bench. "It seems like a lot, but also not enough." "It's enough," I said. "He'll be 74 when he gets out. Too old to start over with the same schemes." Hannah nodded, but I could see something was still bothering her. "What is it, sweetheart?" "I keep wondering about the other women he was seeing while we were dating. The FBI said there were at least 3 others he was manipulating at the same time." I'd wondered about that too. "Did they find them?" "2 of them. They're both pressing charges. But the third one..." Hannah's voice trailed off. "Dad, she was 19, barely older than I was when Mom left. The thought of Marcus targeting a teenager made my stomach turn, but it also confirmed what I'd suspected all along. He was escalating, getting bolder, targeting younger and more vulnerable victims. The important thing is that he can't hurt anyone else now. Because of you, Hannah said quietly. Dad, if you hadn't investigated him, if you hadn't sent that package, you would have figured it out eventually. Would I? I was so completely under his control. I believed everything he told me about you, about our relationship. I was ready to cut you out of my life forever. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the roses bloom. These were the same roses Hannah had helped me plant when she was 14, the ones she'd complained about but secretly been proud of. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. Why didn't you give up on me? When I was so horrible to you, when I chose Marcus over you, when I demanded the Miami house keys, why didn't you just wash your hands of me? I thought about that for a long moment. The honest answer was that I'd come close to giving up several times. There were nights when I'd wondered if Hannah was too far gone, too thoroughly manipulated to save. Because you're my daughter, I said finally. Not the daughter Marcus tried to turn you into, but the real Hannah, the one who used to help me in this garden and fall asleep on my lap during movie nights. That girl was still in there somewhere, and I wasn't going to abandon her. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to make up for what I did to you. You don't need to make up for anything. You were being manipulated by a professional predator. None of his actions were your fault, but the things I said to you were things he taught you to say. Hannah, I've spent the last 3 months learning about psychological manipulation and abuse. What Marcus did to you is called trauma bonding and gaslighting. He systematically destroyed your ability to trust your own perceptions and replaced them with his version of reality. It feels so stupid now. Looking back, I can see all the warning signs I ignored. That's what makes predators like Marcus so dangerous. They're experts at exploiting normal human psychology, wanting to be loved, wanting to belong, wanting to please your partner. Those aren't character flaws. They're normal human needs that he weaponized against you. Hannah wiped her eyes and leaned against my shoulder the way she used to when she was little. So what happens now? She asked. Now you heal, we heal, and we figure out how to have a healthier relationship going forward. What do you mean? I'd been thinking about this for weeks, preparing for this conversation. Hannah, I made mistakes in how I raised you. I was so afraid of you being hurt or disappointed that I protected you from everything, including the normal consequences that teach people how to navigate the world safely. Dad, you were a great father. I was a loving father, but I wasn't always a wise one. I should have taught you how to recognize manipulation, how to set boundaries, how to trust your own instincts. Instead, I just fixed everything for you. So what are you saying? I'm saying that going forward, our relationship needs to be different, more equal. I need to trust you to make your own decisions and handle your own problems, and you need to trust yourself enough to not need my approval for everything. Hannah was quiet for a long time, processing what I'd said. Does this mean you're not going to help me anymore? It means I'm going to help you differently. I'll be here when you need advice or support, but I'm not going to solve your problems for you. You're 28 years old, Hannah. You're capable of handling your own life. But what if I make mistakes? Then you'll learn from them. That's how people develop good judgment, by making small mistakes and learning from the consequences before they make big ones. I thought about the Miami house, still sitting empty after all these months. Hannah had never brought up the keys again after Marcus's arrest, and I'd been waiting to see what she'd do. Actually, I said, I have something for you. I pulled a small envelope from my pocket and handed it to her. Inside were the keys to the Miami house. Hannah stared at them in shock. Dad, I can't accept these, not after everything that happened. The house is yours, Hannah. It always was going to be yours. But now you're getting it as a gift from someone who trusts you to use it wisely, not as something you're entitled to take. What's the difference? The difference is that you understand its value now. You understand that it represents years of hard work and sacrifice, not just a convenient vacation spot. Hannah held the keys in her palm, and I could see her processing the weight of what they represented. I want to earn this, she said finally. What do you mean? I want to pay you rent for the house. Not market rate, but something fair. I want to contribute to the maintenance and upkeep. I don't want to just inherit it. I want to deserve it. I smiled, recognizing the daughter I'd raised beneath the woman Marcus had tried to destroy. That sounds reasonable. Over the following months, I watched Hannah slowly rebuild her sense of self. She started therapy to process the trauma of her marriage to Marcus. She got a job at a non-profit organization, insisting on earning her own way rather than relying on my financial support. She made new friends, carefully chosen people who appreciated her for who she was, rather than what she could give them. The transformation was remarkable. The entitled, demanding young woman who'd called me 3 months after Marcus's arrest to demand the Miami house keys was gone, replaced by someone thoughtful, independent, and genuinely kind. She also started dating again, eventually. But this time, she introduced me to her boyfriends early in the relationship. She asked for my opinion and actually listened to my concerns. More importantly, she trusted her own instincts and ended relationships when something didn't feel right. "I'm not looking for someone to complete me," she told me one evening as we cooked dinner together in my kitchen. "I'm looking for someone to complement the person I already am." It was exactly what I'd hoped she'd learn. A year after Marcus's conviction, Hannah and I took a trip to Miami together. It was the first time either of us had been back to the house since before her marriage. "It feels different," she said as we walked through the rooms that held so many memories. "How so?" "Before I saw it as something I was entitled to inherit. Now I see it as something you worked hard to give me. The responsibility feels different." We spent the weekend cleaning out old memories and making new ones. Hannah had decided to use the house as a vacation rental, donating the profits to organizations that helped victims of domestic abuse and financial fraud. "It seems fitting," she said, using Marcus's intended prize to help other people he might have hurt. On our last evening there, we sat on the deck watching the sunset. The same deck where I'd imagined spending my retirement with future grandchildren. "Dad, do you ever regret not giving Marcus the keys when he first asked?" "Never. Do you?" Hannah shook her head. "If you'd given them to him, he would have used this place as his base of operations for whatever he was planning next. Other women would have been hurt, and you might not be here to watch this sunset with me." We sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned orange and pink, reflecting off the water like a painting. "Dad?" "Yes? Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for finding your way back." The next morning, as we prepared to fly home, Hannah handed me an envelope. "What's this?" "Rent for the Miami house, for the weekend we just spent here." I started to protest, but she held up her hand. "Dad, you taught me that everything has value, that nothing worthwhile is free. This house has value, and I want to pay my fair share for using it." Inside the envelope was a check for $500 and a note. "For the man who taught me the difference between entitlement and gratitude. I love you, Dad." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw someone I was genuinely proud to call family. Not because she was perfect, but because she'd learned to take responsibility for her mistakes and grow from them. 5 years have passed since Marcus's arrest. Hannah is now 33, married to a kind man named David who she met through her work at the nonprofit. He's a social worker, someone who shares her passion for helping people rather than exploiting them. They have a small wedding planned for next spring, and this time I'm walking her down the aisle. Marcus, according to the last prison records I checked, is serving his sentence at a federal facility in Pennsylvania. He'll be eligible for parole in 8 years, when he's 67. I have no doubt that when he gets out, he'll try to start over with the same schemes. But he'll be older, less attractive to potential victims, and he'll have a criminal record that makes him easier to investigate. More importantly, his primary targets, Hannah and myself, are no longer vulnerable. Hannah has learned to recognize manipulation and trust her own instincts. And I've learned to trust her to protect herself. The Miami house has become exactly what I'd originally envisioned, a place where family gathers to make memories. Hannah and David use it for vacations, and I visit several times a year. We're planning to spend Christmas there this year, along with David's parents and siblings. Sometimes late at night I think about what might have happened if I hadn't sent that package to Marcus, if I'd simply refused to give him the keys and let him work on Hannah gradually, patiently, the way he had with his other victims. I think he would have succeeded, eventually. Hannah would have signed over power of attorney, given him access to our family's assets, isolated herself completely from me. And then, when he'd taken everything he wanted, I probably would have died in some convenient accident, just like Catherine Rothwell. But instead, Marcus is in prison, Hannah is happy and healthy, and I get to be the grandfather I always dreamed of being when their first child is born next year. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic or public. Sometimes it's simply living well, surrounded by people who love you for who you really are, rather than what you can give them. And sometimes, the greatest victory is not losing the person you love most to someone who never deserved them in the first place. As I write this, I can hear Hannah and David laughing in my kitchen as they prepare dinner. She's teaching him to make my mother's recipe for pot roast, the same recipe I taught her when she decided she wanted to learn to cook for herself, rather than relying on restaurants and takeout. The sound of her genuine laughter, free from manipulation and fear, is the sweetest revenge I could ever imagine. Marcus Rothwell stole 3 months of my daughter's life, but he failed to steal her future, her capacity for love, or her relationship with me. In the end, that failure was his complete destruction and our complete victory. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.